All right. So as Carla said, my name is Adil, and I've worked with at least 8 to 10 of you. We've collaborated on various projects in various capacities and in various different contexts, etc. So it's a lot of the things that you will see, you would already know, but I'll try to give it a spin. Also, a lot of the stories that we've heard over the course of today and yesterday, they will repeat here as well in some capacities, but I will try to give it a spin again. All right, so I just wanted to start off with my interest, which is the kind of documents that architects produce. So we produce all kinds of things, we produce text, we produce drawings, we produce images, renders, animations, bills of quantities, this, that, we produce software, we produce tools, instruments, etc., etc. But then just to kind of start locating at what images could be or how to deal with architectural rendering today and the scale of artificial intelligence and the scale of the immense floods of images that are present today, I just want to pitch these two pictures together. So, I mean, they're both done through, they're both photographs in one way or the other. But on one side, you see, so I would argue that they're both completely different at the same time. So on the left side, you see when we realize the limits of our perception and we take it as the truth. So nothing outside exists. So this is the idea of an image as truth. This is the idea of the sealing, of the locking down of a people, of the objectification of people, of the objectification of what it means to see, etc. And on the right side, this image of a black hole that I brought up yesterday as well, which is a different kind of image because this is not something that we can see with our bare eyes. So there is no way to prove that this is right or this is the truth or this is correct. So it's built out of multiple telescopes that are taking pictures of this black hole from different points on our planet, and then put together by just what it means to be an image, what an object to us looks like. So on the left side, you see us believing what we see, and on the right side, we see a symbolization of the limits of our perception. On the left, you see an image that consoles the eye, and on the right, you see one that banishes it from our corporeality. And it looks like architects have been the first people to banish the eye from what we construct. So this is a coin. On the other side is Alberti's portrait. And on the other side that we see here, it's the eye with wings on it. So this is an eye that has left the body, that has left the personal perception of an observer, and it becomes a floating thing. It becomes an observatory of sorts. So in that respect, I think it's interesting, considering how cameras are ubiquitous today. Like everyone has a camera for no bloody reason, but we still have them in all of our phones, whatever. So what was happening just before the invention of the camera? So this is what is called a diorama. This was done roughly 20 years before the birth of photography. And by the birth of photography, I mean the idea that you can seal an image. So it was invented by Daguerre and Boutin, one the inventor of photography and the other a painter. So this is a double-sided canvas. It's painted on both sides and it's lit in the light of the world. So it's illuminated by the sun. Also, it is illuminated by, so this guy that you see on the side that is trying to rotate and position the painted image according to the position of the sun. At times, this guy comes to the front holding a lantern and illuminating certain things. So at this particular moment in time is very, very interesting to me because there's a lot of hacky ways of doing things. So photography is in the air. painters are talking about it, scientists are talking about it, mathematicians are talking about it, everyone is talking about it. And then within this mode, suddenly we have a lot of very hacky inventions. So the diorama is one. There was a magic lantern, which had like 5 different lenses attached to it, lit by a candle, whatever. So very, very strange things are happening. So this is what a diorama looks today. So again, we see a ceiling of the idea of a diorama, something that was a movable theatrical spectacle, that always had to deal with what light is coming in, that was not dependent on the ceiling of images, which was clearly an artificial thing, a synthetic thing, a thing that is not meant to be real. Suddenly it gets sealed into that. So it's, I think in a moment like today, where we're really, considering the today and yesterday, we're really trying to see again, we're learning how to deal with images again. So I think this becomes very interesting. And this again is a sealing of an idea of an ecosystem. This relates back to this National Geographic photograph of the Afghan girl as well. So it's really a sealing of an ecosystem, that there's nothing more outside of that. So suddenly things get fixed. So a diorama, in my perception, is more like this. So this is Duchamp's last project, last installation, last work called Given. And this was developed in the last 20 years of his life, where he apparently had given up art and had devoted his life to chess completely. And Duchamp, of course, is interested in quantum physics. He's very well in tune with the technologies of the time, with the science of the time, with everything that was going in the air. So this, you can access it. I think it's in the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And this spectacle that you saw just now, this is behind 2 large Spanish doors. And there's an oculus through which you can see it. So this is what it actually looks like. This is the back end, the artifice of this spectacle. And I would argue again that this is in the realm of the objectification of the gaze. So with the presence of this oculus, with its existence as purely artificial, I think this starts to play in a similar manner. So it becomes an observatory of sorts. What's interesting about it is not just the installation, the physical reality of it, but that Duchamp releases a manual of instructions for it. So this is fully detailed, with meticulous photographs, documentation of what are the objects that are supposed to be used, what is the order of certain operations that are there to assemble them and reassemble them as you would go along. Yeah, but it's meticulously documented. And in the first line, Duchamp calls it an demountable approximation. So it's approximate, it's never fixed, it's always moving here and there. Here you see the 15 instructions. The order of it is very clear. There's no explanations why these things are happening. There's no explanation of who should be doing that. But it's just a deadpan set of operations used to put this thing together. So this becomes interesting in another way because it's clear from this manual that this is not how Duchamp put it together himself. So it's a layer of storytelling involved on top of how things are built. So this is not an IKEA manual, precisely because this is the instructions are there to expand the notion of this construction. I would wish that architectural documents would be like this as well. So it's completely, what would you call it? it's completely agnostic to the kind of media that are being used. So we have pictures, we have text, we have physical constructions, we have lamps, we have electricity, we have all kinds of it. So even there's a gas lamp involved there somewhere, you know. So just completely, what was it again? It's completely agnostic to that. So if we really consider this idea of the setting up of a stage and things being artificial and things being willfully artificial, then I think we need to look at stages. I think we need to look at theaters. So in this respect, what's also interesting is that the architectural treatises that are happening from the time of Vitruvius, then Alberti, then Pozzo, then Serlio, etc. All of them are somehow talking about theaters. Why? Because this is not just a mechanics of construction or of correct geometric construction, but a mechanics of storytelling. Because of course there's no movies, there's no TV, there's none of these things are present. So you see here in the Teatro Olimpico that Li Su just showed as well. So immense amounts of infrastructure, immense amounts of money go into this, into the construction of this theater. It's still alive in Vicenza. Now these candles have been replaced by electricity, of course. Yeah, these are bad 90s graphics, so you might as well live with it. Yeah, so I mean, why do that? So it's interesting to ask that. So why put in so much effort to construct these spectacular things? Wait, let me just move my Zoom. Yeah, so in a way they were showing off as well. So it's in the Renaissance, everyone was showing off the idea of perspective, of course. But the other thing is that this is a stage that exemplifies the ideal city. So the first play that was performed there was Oedipus Rex, a play written roughly 2,000 years before this stage was constructed. But then suddenly the idea of perspective attaches itself so clearly to the theater that we can take all stories from all times, and now that we're playing on a different scale of optics, on a different scale of geometry, that we can play these stories within the new scale. So Oedipus Rex does not get old. Suddenly it is placed within a new scale. Suddenly a model of life is brought within this new scale. So this is something that Ludger was talking about as well, that these new scales, it's just a differentiation in levels. So they absorb all the rest, they domesticate them, and then suddenly you can put models on stage from before, from life, on to play within this new construction. Yeah, what's also interesting is that it's unabashedly fake. So it's just, it's not there to convince anyone that it's real. It's not there along the lines of this suspension of disbelief, it's not there to make things believable. You know, now that we see all these kind of marketing ploys of making things believable, of making things realistic. You know, this is a lot to do with computer graphics as well, with AR, VR, etc. You know, they're always trying to make you, to convince you that this is real. However, if we see the role of illusions within architecture, they were unabashedly fake. They were always about being fake. So it's, yeah. So the full term is actually the willing suspension of disbelief. And I think this is incredibly important because with that, we are investing into an illusion. not being convinced of one. So this is what happens when we go to the theater. We suspend our inquiries about whether it's real or not, and just take it as such because we would like to invest in it. We would like to talk about things in a fictitious, in a synthetic manner. So what do theaters look like today? Now you see with this, what's it called, Mandalorian, what Industrial Light and Magic did. They just constructed a huge volume that can be changed at will. So any kind of lighting conditions, any geography, any objects, they can be put into this infrastructural thing, and it can say whatever it wants to say, whatever you want it to say. So this is the exact opposite, I think, of this kind of a theater where the stage is already a scene. Here, there is nothing at all. It's just pure infrastructure that can be whatever you want it to be. Yeah, it's funny with this. I always tell the story, but then apparently the reason why they tried to go into this direction, besides green screens, is that the protagonist in this series, the Mandalorian, he has a very shiny armor. So people were going crazy cleaning out the reflections of the green screen from the main character. So a stupid kind of problem that was resolved in such a what do you call it, spectacular manner. But then there are other kinds of stages as well. So we see one side where the stage is the scene. It is extremely heavy and it's extremely expressive. And on the other, it's purely infrastructure. But I think with Greenaway, in his movies, it's the cook, the thief, the wife, the lover. I think I always mess up this order. But then you see the characters within the scene start being affected by and affecting the spaces in which they are present. So you see, if I play this again, you have Helen Mirren and the ladies' room, everything is white, her dress is white, she has particular flowers there, etc. And then she goes into another room where suddenly she has to respect the room itself. Her dress changes. If you had seen it earlier, the color of her cigarette changes, etc., etc. And then with Greenaway, it's almost to the point of caricature how much the stages affect the characters within it. But I think it's an interesting kind of middle spot between these two kind of screens that we saw earlier. So, yeah, on the other side, I also find it interesting how Hollywood deals with architecture. So I think in terms of graphics, in terms of spectacles, of illusions, of artifices, etc., Hollywood is way ahead of architects because we're stuck in some, I don't know, prehistoric idea of what it means to draw, etc. So, and we are also loaded with a kind of really stupid art historical idea of progress, where we always have to construct new things that have to supersede the ones before. So it's never about a new scale through which you become so generous that you can take all, but it's about cutting the layers of history that are before, or using that as a line to articulate something new. So this is the Ennis House by Frank Lloyd Wright. I mean, so a caricature of that would be that Frank Lloyd Wright builds temples. He builds temples for powerful people to live in. And then we see how this kind of character shifts around into movies. So it becomes a stage set in which many movies are shot, many characters are present in it. It's present in Westworld. Is it Westworld? Yeah, it is Westworld. Blade Runner, of course. Vincent Price is there. It's the set of a horror show. Firefly is there. Game of Thrones again. Game of Thrones. Twin Peaks. Blade Runner. Westworld. Ricky Martin. And also the lair of a supervillain in Star Trek, I think. Yeah, so with these many ways of how this particular construction by Frank Lloyd Wright is staged, it's interesting to see that there's still a character there. So it's not exhausted by putting a very strong character there. It's also not open for everyone. You know, not every character can be here. It's somehow in this realm of schizophrenic, megalomaniac characters that are present there. So with all of these renditions, you still see that it has something in the middle that is consistent. And it's not, I don't think it's some kind of essence, because then all these stages are false. And there is only one truth that is present somewhere that nobody can ever access. I think all of these renditions are all truthful, and it's within these many truths that there's an invariance to this masterpiece. So, inanimate objects, do you have a soul? I find this incredibly beautiful, this question that Michel Serres asks in his short essay on Virginia Woolf's The Lighthouse. And the answer is yes, yes, yes. So things are alive, things are moving, objects talk, especially today with the Internet of Things, etc. It's, your freezer is talking, the kitchen table is talking. They all have a force, they all have an intelligence that we have to make certain contracts with. And then within the spaces that we make as architects, these things talk loudly. These things affect things loudly. The windows talk to the trees talk to the bloody kitchen table, whatever. And then of course, it's also the idea that when you leave your house, is it still present? You know, this classic kind of realist questions. Of course it is present. Of course it is still alive. Of course it talks in its own way. But then when you enter your house, suddenly it starts to position itself with you. You know, so suddenly a conversation is created again between yourself and where you live, for example. So now we see, in the fertile grounds of the internet, we have all kinds of objects, so 3D models. I mean, I like them a lot because I play a lot of computer games, and I like this idea of things being able to talk and things being able to tell certain stories. This is particularly related to From Software games. I don't know if you guys know them, but it's just very, very cool. That's what I think. And then, of course, you can find any objects with any kind of texture on them, you know, expertly done, scanned, badly done, badly scanned, whatever. So it's just full. And then to think of other kinds of objects. So these are all images of objects, you know, images of things pretending to be things. And then we see this kind of play with things that are not meant to be seen. So this is a series of photographs by Sujimoto, a photographer that I love quite a lot. And I discovered that he makes a lot of pictures of theater. So it's immediately I'm sold. So I think these he took in the Museum of Mathematics, I think in Tokyo, and these are basically illustrations of mathematical models. We have you have certain kinds of curves, you have certain kinds of spheres worked on through a particular kind of geometry that is not meant to be seen, that needs to be worked on in a mathematical manner, so without images. But then he takes them and then he starts staging them. So I see that again in a similar line as a black hole image. So when do we start making images of things that we cannot see? I think it's similar to how plans have worked within architecture. It's really, you're not supposed to see that. It's never going to be present in the building. You can't see a plan, so very simple stuff, but you have to make it regardless. And then you see that this series that Sujimoto is making is based on this on the Man Ray exhibition called Shakespeare in Equations. So Man Ray goes to the Natural History Museum, I think, in Berlin. No, sorry, the Henry Poincaré Institute in Berlin. And then he takes these pictures of the mathematical models and then he mobilizes them by assigning them characters. So not that they don't have characters before, but that suddenly it starts playing in a different world, in a different light, on a different stage. So we see Julius Caesar, we see Hamlet, we see the Midsummer Night's Dream, etc., etc. So I find these kind of things very, very interesting because, they're, on one point you would think that this is completely stupid, but on the other side, it's also interesting to take things that don't talk and make them talk in a very specific manner. So again, with Hollywood, again with Blade Runner, we see that the things that they're dealing with, they're all heavily loaded. So for example, in the earlier example of the Greenaway movie, the everything is so incredibly charged. Like the costume design is by Jean-Paul Gaultier. The flowers are brought in from a specific place in the world. And it's always things that are loaded, that are talking, that have legacies, that have histories, that are put into a conversation by putting them on stage. So we see Descartes drinking out of a particular kind of glass. We see Rachel with a particular kind of lamp. We see Descartes with a particular kind of lamp. And then we have the bed, the table, the chair, etc. Yeah. So things are loaded, things are talking, things are put on stage by constructing an observatory, by constructing the idea of perspective. So now I just want to go into some registers of how to look at architectural articulations. So these apply to text as well as to images. So don't think that this is purely image-based. But then I'll give you a few sets of trees to kind of localize what I'm talking about. And I'll give you a few examples of how I do it as well. So currently with the kind of tools we're using, etc., and the idea of finding solutions, finding precision, etc., it's interesting, instead of looking at solutions, to think of resolution, because it's not about resolving a certain problem, but about finding ways to chop things up, finding ways to discretize things. And in a similar way, the idea of the scale is discretized. So it's not a smooth thing, because on these CAD softwares, you can just roll your mouse here and roll your mouse there, and then you're in the smooth zoom in and out of things that just don't have a life outside of a particular moment, because that is not what an architectural detail is. An architectural detail has a life of its own, like we saw earlier with the objects. The details, windows, elements, etc., they all talk. So This is a painter that I really like, Franz Klein, and then he was doing these seemingly abstract paintings for quite a long time, and they're massive, huge paintings. And then it turns out that they're not so abstract after all, because they're extreme zoom-ins of certain domestic generic things. So this, I think, is a chair. There's stable legs, acting like columns. There's the underside of a chair that becomes a large canopy, etc. So it's always somehow discretized, and you can tell a certain story about these things from different scales. So this is another example that I like very much. This is the game Everything, where exactly this particular idea is mobilized. So there's nothing much you do in this game except that you can play as a tree, you can play as a galaxy, you can play as a butterfly, as a balloon, as an island, as a microbe, etc., etc. So suddenly all of these scales that we see, this is the exact kind of opposition to the powers of 10 by the Eames, where there's a smooth scaling in and out, zooming in and out of the world into outer space. And here we see that things can talk on many scales. And I mean, even though this might be an illustration of that, but that these things are within the sensibility of today. So this is, So exactly this point, where you have to start discretizing certain things. This is where I've done quite a lot of teaching. So with my students, we would scan a lot of things, and then we would start subjecting it to typical architectural documentation. So you have dashed lines, you have sections, etc. You try to produce a certain composition. You try to see what is the difference between the inside and the outside. So really, these very old architectural questions, that we address through drawings that are inexhaustible. So it's you cannot resolve the inside-outside problem. It's always resolutions within a certain mode or within a certain story. So here you see the section cut of a cactus, discretized. We suddenly see a continuity within the surface, and on the outside you see a discretization of each particular space found within it. This is another example where I was working in an office where we took the skyline of Chicago and we started stitching it together. So suddenly we're taking very low resolution images of things, but then increasing resolution where the buildings meet. So suddenly it starts to stitch together multiple objects. So this is a similar game. This was with Damien at the Städelschule in the first year design studio that we were doing. So again, these are scanned models, and then suddenly you start drawing it over and over again, and you have to construct a way to make it measurable somehow. You have to construct a way to make it coherent somehow. So suddenly you start addressing, okay, what does what the thickness of the line would mean, what the overlay of a certain color would mean, what to do when two objects meet, etc. So very, very kind of basic architectural questions. And then, of course, with these supercharged, when these drawing techniques become supercharged, then you can turn them around and then produce objects through them. So suddenly they become sculptured bodies that follow the same logic that was in the drawings. And then you can 3D print them out, preferably with color because they just look better. And then you can also exhibit them in an archaeological survey of sorts. So what I like about this this project very much is that these objects can live in many different renditions. So they can become part of an exhibition. They can become completely involuted and start playing out things. They can be turned around and produce landscapes as well. which is what happens here. So you can take these kind of weird documentary techniques and start playing them out over and over and over again. And they start spilling out, they can spill out in many ways. Yeah, I think my point here is that just the presence of them in many worlds really kills these super artificial boundaries that we have with VR, with I don't know, with AR and all the kind of freaky names that are present now. Because there are things that can live in all of these worlds, all at the same time, all together, thereby killing the idea of the discreteness of these worlds. Because these worlds are intertwined in a way that in order to disentangle them, it's a lost cause already. On the other side, you can disentangle them and use them as a marketing strategy. So this we see a lot with, how Zuckerberg is selling us the metaverse, as if there's a utopian other world that has no connection to the world that we live in, that can be coherent somehow, as if bad people here can be good people there. So it's a strange kind of bad idea. So another set of three. So this again is the Städelschule with Damian. And then this is where we're taking canonical buildings and then trying to recompose them. So we use the platform sandbox, of course, but then we took the many exercises, we selected one and we started chiseling at it. So we started working on it intensively. Within a CAD software where the precision was not according to the measurements you make, but the precision of a certain expression of posture, of a certain expression of style, of a certain character. So you see here, we have the Ronchamp, we see, I don't know, the Vanavanturi house here, we see a Zaha building here, we see Louis Kahn here. So these are all, they all retain some characteristics of where they're coming from, but then they add more as well. So what we took all of these and made them respond to certain programmatic requirements because we took part in this competition. I still love this project quite a lot. I think it ages well. And then the kind of manifesto we sold it with was, we don't want to kill the stories of the island. We want to enrich them by orchestrating a bal masque around it. So we put up the surface, the platform that you've heard a lot about from Damian, and then we place these objects, talking to each other in one way or the other. Yeah, we didn't get any prizes, sadly, but yeah, the competition was very open. The one requirement they had was that you cannot build outside the island. So yeah, I can't blame them for not giving us anything. So again, in this style, character, posture set, this is another project with some students in Düsseldorf. And then we went to the Ruhrgebiet, that is the industrial area in Germany and the northwest, let's say. And this is where all the coal and the steel industry was. And now it's mostly a ruin. If you go there at the Solverein, where this project is actually present, they call it industrial nature because everything has been taken over by weeds, by trees, by plants. And then our idea here was to take the objects that are present there and then try to produce an alienation of them. So what could that be? So could it be a certain softness introduced into these kind of heavy rusted pipes? You make it pink to make it even stronger. Could it be that you start sampling the textures from the site and start composing objects accordingly with them? So these are all kind of renditions of this alienation of the objects that we found there. And this is done, of course, with heavy texture mapping, heavy graphics, rendering, etc., etc. So another sketch, I don't have an instrument, kill me, but it's, I think still there are instrumental ways we can operate with. So these idea of games, tools, and toys, they are present. It's really a spectrum, and it depends on how you use these things. I mean, you can use a guitar to hammer a nail. That would be stupid. Don't do that. But it's just that it has a lot to do with how you use things. So if you become very, very, very virtuoso in Rhino, you can do things with it that Rhino could never do with other people. So it's it's a kind of weird relationship. Of course, it's good. I think, at least for myself, that you use all the things that are available. And then if you have a spectrum of those, then you can choose when you have very specific tasks, when you want to do sketches, when you want to do this, that, etc. Because we have the spectrum available to us, and then we can still sketch, no problem. Because with the new scale of the kind of things that we're dealing with, suddenly it brings a generosity of how you can work. So you can work in any media, you can churn things out and export them into any media as well. So it's really not a matter of choosing the optimum. It's a matter of making the decision to choose one or the other. So this is what I did together with Carla, where we took 52,000 3D models of regular objects. There are chairs in it, there are tables, toilets, brushes, etc., etc. And then you do a map that you saw a better version of with Carla yesterday. But I think this was a fantastic failure because these objects are all generic, so they have nothing to say. They are pure, they're stand-ins for something else. So it's, I mean, the new one that I would like to do now is to take objects that have a spirit, that have a soul to them, that have a certain legacy, etc. As you saw with Mira and Jorge's library as well. So it's important that they have the ability to talk and be present in multiple worlds all at the same time. So with this kind of weird map of super generic objects, then we had to do something with them, and we started to look at parts of the map, where things aren't really talking to each other because they belong to a certain different affinity, and then to start putting them together. Suddenly we get exquisite courses of things that are always vibrating, are always shivering, are always not comfortable with their own self. And then again, you can put it to kind of conventional architectural tools of the section, of the interior shot, of the money shot, blah, blah, whatever, and then you can make something out of it. But in all of these cases that I'm showing you, it's always not about the celebration of noise or of different things being present within the same space, but the iconicity of the things coming out of it. So in this case, again, I think this is a bad example because it's not iconic at all, because it's made out of trash and it looks a bit like trash. But I think this still can play a role in how we look at drawings. So another set of three. Yeah, so how to deal with, there was this talk about plagiarism as well. And a story came to my mind of Nabokov and how, so this writer, and how towards the end of his life, he was dealing with butterflies. So just documenting them, trying to study the wings, the patterns on them, etc. And then before Nabokov, so he actually made a solid contribution to the study of why these wings are so expressive and so colored. Because before that, it was always considered a part of a survival tool. So that the wings of the butterfly are colored because it helps them to hide within the forest. But then it turns out that with the extreme expression of color that they're producing, they're not mixing in, they're not camouflaging with the context at all. Instead, they're standing out of it. So it becomes a different thing altogether. So what might have started as a pure mimicry, as a pure imitation, suddenly spills over and it produces new effects. He also has this other story of a caterpillar that was very good at replicating the color and pattern of a particular leaf. But then he was always out of season. So he was always out of time. And then he would be in the summer what the leaf would look like in the winters. So hilariously bad, but it's not about survival at all. And then you see these kind of dioramic constructions that take this idea of copying or sampling things very, very explicitly. So this is the destroyed room. This is a diorama constructed by Jeff Wall. So these are all people of a similar time. And then initially it just looks like a destroyed room, but then you realize that it's a pure imitation of the composition that you find in this painting by Delacroix. So you see the objects have been replaced by other objects. There's a certain spirit in the composure of this painting that is deployed here and used by replacing objects. So this is a similar exercise to that, where it was a small workshop where we looked at paintings and then we tried to expand it into the spaces that you cannot see in front of the camera and after it. So yeah, of course, not in a game engine, but then also the objects are replaced. The composure of it is still somewhat present there. And I think this is interesting that, you can just take composition from here, take elements from there, take rendering techniques from here and put them together in a kind of iconic manner. So how to deal with materials, textures, and colors. So all these sets of threes that I'm talking about, they're stacking up. So they're not independent from each other. They're all layering one upon each other. And these are all the kind of decisions that we need to locate within any architectural object, be it text, be it image, be it renders, models, etc., whatever. So today, as with everything else, we have a huge catalog of any kind of material that you can think of. And what's also stranger is that you can have plastic that reflects like glass. You can have rubber that talks like, I don't know, a cactus, whatever. So it's a weird kind of tactility that is available to us in the shape of normal maps and color maps and displacement maps, etc. So two examples of this kind of electricity of materials where these materials screen in a certain way. So this is a project by Kreis and Gantenbein in Basel that I like very much. And it's the first time you look at it, it's really a very typical Swiss bunker, because there's so many of them. And then it's made out of stone because, of course, everything has to be made out of stone. But then you see suddenly it comes to life once in a while. It's the stone stacks suddenly start displaying things. So this is a very kind of brash application of an electric materiality. So what kind of a concrete screen could that be? On the other side, we have another kind of electricity to materials. So this is a building in Zurich that I recently discovered, and I like it a lot. This is in an area called Glatt, I think. It's by Villaretz. And then the bylaws stated that all the facades of the buildings have to be stone. So they took the decision to get the best stone in the world, which was, according to them, the marble inside the Barcelona pavilion. So they just took a picture of that and they printed it throughout the facade. So suddenly it is loaded with the story of the Barcelona pavilion, where that piece of marble came from, etc. And it's a constructed legacy of what this materiality is. So I like this very much, because suddenly through materials, we can talk in a certain way as well. We can load it up with stories. What kind of gold do you want to work with? You take the gold from Cleopatra's necklace and you can work with that. And this I find very, very beautiful and exciting, that suddenly it's not like the Zumthor style truth of the material and what it wants to be and it wants to do, etc. But many kinds of truths that can expand what a material is or what it means to talk by a facade of any sort. Yeah, so another set of three. Certainly now we're in this realm of, when we've dealt with scale, materiality, discretization, etc., and suddenly how to put these things together. So this example I like very much. This is how I like to characterize our studio, not just, there is sound in it as well. I'll just play it and then we can talk. Yeah, so this is from a movie called Vatel, and this is a small town that has to organize a party for them for Louis XIV, and then of course with all the loaded rituals, etc. Then suddenly they have to create these kind of illusions that only work because they find their composure within certain rituals. So these rituals are there because certain things have to be discussed in a certain way. So it's always part and parcel of this idea of illusions and of this idea of faking things. So with the studio, I mean, you've heard from Jorge and Mira as well about it, but I'll just show you some projects that I like very much. So now we're in the 6th season. It's always a point that we like to make with the studio is that we are always discussing global problems. So we're discussing the idea of radical recycling. We're discussing with how there is no space in cities today to argue about certain things, how architecture gives power a face, how the idea of alienation could be deployed by using two characters, one Ludwig Wittgenstein when we take his house, and one by Lenny Belardo, who is in the series by Sorrentino called The Young Pope. So how these two aliens could come and talk to each other. Then in the fifth one, enginderings, where we're talking about the Xenofeminist Manifesto and how could that be helpful in articulating a project of the Maison Bordeaux, where Coco Chanel moves in. And then this time we're dealing with the idea of faces, what it means to be a private citizen in a fully connected world. And I'll just show a few kind of snippets of the studio. So I will just show it to you through Instagram. And then, of course, these are, these are projects that went through 12 weeks of just talking, using any tool, using any software, etc. Of course, with our heavily charged infrastructure of Alice and panoramas of cinema. And then they come to my module at the end, and then we use whatever is there, mostly like game engines, because we don't want to labor in the realm of 3D modeling, etc. But then to develop state sets that can be done in Photoshop, sketches, whatever you may have. So this is a project that I like very much, and this is from the last season that ended 5-6 days ago, and it's about these two pop stars that move into Brussels on a very iconic plot, and then they have to the students had to kind of construct a domestic space within this city. And with this particular project, it's next to the one of the biggest open markets in Europe. And within this project, it's really obsession about a certain obsession with food, a certain obsession with branding, a certain obsession with insane theatricality as well. So then you see, in terms of the kind of operative shots that the student was working with, see, it's pure magic, so it does not satisfy the kind of condition of the software within which it is produced, because it's heavily processed, it's heavily post-processed over and over again, and suddenly it starts spilling out of its means of construction. And of course, this does not stand without the text that was written on it, the kind of images that were produced, sampled before this. I'll just go quickly through that. Yeah, what I like is that when you're dealing with this new scale, then suddenly very, very old techniques come into play as well. So you don't have to reject them because they're old, but you can just deploy them wherever you see fit. So at the end of our studio, what we do is we take all these dots in the sky, all the colors that we got from the panoramas of cinema, and start locating them. And we start making state sets on the site and start electrifying each element of the model through the stories, through colors, through temperaments, textures, etc., etc. Yeah, this here is another project called Chanel Baby Soft, where Coco Chanel moves into the Maison Bordeaux. And then, of course, she brings her own color to this kind of machine that Colas makes, brings a softness to it. Yeah, I would really suggest you follow the Instagram page. Secondly, I would also suggest that you have a look at the actual presentations of the students, because here you really see the project as a whole coming together, where the images, where the text, where the renderings, etc., they all start to play and perform together for these projects. Yeah, and then you see throughout the studio, we just talk. So it's 12 weeks of just talking, but somehow we get iconic articulations from that. All right, I think that's it from my side. I couldn't see any faces or anyone, so yeah, it was like an insane place to talk to.
We were applause. You didn't hear us, but we were really loud here after you finished.
And I don't know if any of my bad jokes worked because I couldn't see anything. Probably not. Looks like.
We were just having a silent disco while you were presenting.